Alright, what's going on everyone, and welcome to the series where we discuss terribly broken, degenerate decks in Magic's history that were so powerful they needed to be banned. Today we're looking at Aetherworks Marvel, sometimes referred to as Temur Marvel or Marvelous Energy. This was a standard deck that was banned in 2017 when the format was totally upended by the energy mechanic that was introduced with the Kaladesh block. So if you are familiar, energy is basically like mana that doesn't empty from your mana pool. There are cards that can add energy and there are cards that can spend it. So this was a very controversial mechanic and I never really understood why. The number one reason people disliked it, or at least why they said they disliked it, was that you couldn't interact with energy counters, but that's already true for mana and mana pools, and there were already cards that allowed you to have your mana pool not empty between phases. However, this was a new mechanic, and it was basically a new resource for the game, and as such, there was no precedent for how much energy a card should generate without being too powerful, and unfortunately, Wizards of the Coast underestimated just how powerful it would be to store a resource between turns, and so a lot of energy cards actually just ended up being too powerful, leading to multiple banned decks during Kaladesh's run in Standard. This was also during a time in Magic's history when the design team had a pretty firm stance on not printing answers to the key mechanics of sets within the same set. That is to say, like for example, if there was an artifact set, in the past there would be really strong artifact destruction spells in that same set. You know, if it was a tribal set, there would either be strong board sweepers or tribal hate cards, like a name a creature type and destroy all of those creatures, something of that sort, right? So the problem with this philosophy is that everyone would get excited for a set during preview season only to have those cards not really be competitive because the same set that released those cards would have tons of really strong answers. So during this time, if a set had a mechanic like the energy mechanic, for example, they didn't want to print a strong counter to that mechanic to drown out the star of the show. So the energy mechanic was a bit more powerful than Wizards of the Coast expected, and it was able to run rampant, completely unchecked, because there were no strong answers to counter it. And that brings us to Aetherworks Marvel. It's a 4-mana artifact that says when a permanent you control is put into a graveyard, you get 1 energy. Then you can tap it and spend 6 energy to look at the top 6 cards of your library and cast one of those without paying its mana cost. So in a nutshell, it doesn't seem terrible, but unfortunately this card was in the same standard environment as an Eldrazi set, so the card it was looking to cast for free was Ulmog, the Ceaseless Hunger. It's a 10 mana 10/10 that says when you cast it, you get to exile 2 of your opponent's permanents, and do note that the Marvel says that you cast the card, so you will get to exile 2 things. It's also indestructible, and even though it doesn't have trample, it still ends the game after a couple turns because when it attacks, the opponent mills 20 cards. So this deck could theoretically cast Marvel on turn 4, activate it immediately because it's an artifact, and cast an indestructible 10/10 and exile 2 of your permanents. And that's any permanent, so even if you didn't have any creatures or anything, it could exile your lands. And also note that you could activate Marvel at instant speed, so you could activate this during your opponent's combat phase for a surprise blocker. And instant speed Ulmog could not only blow up 2 permanents, but also destroy an attacker as well, which is pretty devastating. There were other targets for Marvel, you know, there were things like Emrakul, Chandra, even Torrential Gearhulk was played, but basically the deck did really big stupid things as early as turn 4, as long as it had 6 energy, and that was not a lot. The deck could easily manage it with cards like Attune with Ether, Servant of the Conduit, and Rogue Refiner. The first tutors for a land and adds 2 energy. The second is a mana ramper and also adds 2 energy. And Rogue Refiner was insane in Standard. It's a 3 mana 3/2 that not only added 2 energy, but actually drew a card when it entered, which is just like insane. The fact that it draws, why does it draw? Who knows? So even with these on turns 1, 2, and 3, on turn 4, we have 6 energy, technically on turn 3. But the deck could have even more with cards like Whirler Virtuoso, Harnessed Lightning, and Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot, each of which add 3 each. The Virtuoso can also spend energy to make Thopters. Not really what you want to do with your energy, but if you're under attack from an aggro deck, it might be necessary. Harnessed Lightning was a removal spell. It added 3 energy, and then you could spend any amount to deal that much damage. So if you didn't want to kill anything, it's just 2 mana, add 3 energy. It's half a Marvel spin. And the Puzzle Knot was one of the most powerful cards in the deck, even though it might not look like it at first glance. It adds 3, and you gain 3 life, but it could also sacrifice itself for 3 more energy and life. So the reason this is so powerful is when you spun Marvel, your ideal target was obviously Ulmog, but if you whiffed, if you didn't see Ulmog, ideally you would see a Puzzle Knot, because you could pick that. When it enters, you get 3 energy, then you could sacrifice it for 3 more, and that's another respin. It ultimately adds 6 energy and 6 life, and also note that Marvel, when the Puzzle Knot dies, will also get another energy, so it's actually 7 energy. It's a full Marvel activation plus 1. Not to mention, the life gain was actually very relevant, since this deck was a little bit dirtily in the early game. And this made the deck much more consistent. Not only did it have whiff protection with Puzzle Knot, but it's important to keep in mind that after you activate Marvel, you put the cards you don't cast on the bottom of your library. So you're actually digging through your deck each time you miss. If you activate this 3 times, you're not just looking at 6 random cards 3 times, you're looking at 18 different cards, so long as you don't shuffle. So the combination of slowly working through your deck with each Marvel activation and getting free respins with the Puzzle Knot made this deck very capable of finding that Ulmog very consistently. If the opponent whiffed on their first activation, it just made them more likely to find Ulmog the next turn. And even if the deck doesn't find Ulmog, the card advantage from getting free spells was still great for grinding out games. I mean, sure, Rogue Refiner is no Ulmog, but getting a free one as an ambush blocker on your opponent's attack step and redrawing a second card is great, right? Not only does it trade 1 for 1, but it draws an extra card and it adds 3 energy. It adds 2 when it enters and 1 when it dies. That's already half an activation. So you can see how easy it was for this deck to build up enough energy to activate Marvel constantly. The deck also had a lot of ways to find Marvel more consistently. It had things like Glint Nest Crane, Ether Theorist, Glimmer of Genius. The bird digs 4 cards deep for an artifact. The other 2 help you filter through your deck in addition to adding even more energy. So more consistency there. Basically, the deck could use Aetherworks Marvel to power out a turn 4 Ulmog, complete with its cast trigger, and this completely derailed competitive Magic. The problem with this deck is how luck-based it is. Marvel mirror matches were literal blind luck. Neither player cared about the board state. They both blindly spun the Wheel of Fate, and the first to hit Ulmog won the game. All of the strategic depth of Magic was out the window, and the game was reduced to just blind chance. And don't get me wrong, Magic has a lot of randomness. It's built into the game. We literally build decks of cards and draw them randomly. The entire game is built around random chance. There's even coin flipping decks, and even competitive Magic, some games are determined by random chance. If someone doesn't draw enough lands, someone top decks their key sideboard piece at the right time. That's part of the game. But the problem is, this was competitive Magic, right? This was the peak of Magic. This is the best players in the world playing one of the most complex strategy games in existence, and to have entire tournaments decided by who found Ulmog first felt pretty bad. So on June 13th, 2017, Wizards of the Coast announced that Aetherworks Marvel would be banned. They actually gave a very very lengthy explanation. There's an entire article. You can't read it anymore because it's broken, but you can find it on the Wayback Machine. And what's interesting about their justification for banning it is it didn't necessarily have a crazy high win percentage. It was consistently winning tournaments and making the top 8, but its win percentage was like 50-50, right? Because it's just like a flip. It was like a coin flip. But the problem was the turn 4 Ulmog was just horrible to play against. It was unbeatable. It literally just like removed the competitive nature of Magic. It was so pointless. It was so redundant. There was no point in watching it. And yeah, that's why the deck got banned. It was pretty silly. It was very silly. So yeah, if you like this video and you want to see more like it, I have a playlist dedicated to these banned decks, and you can find a link to it in the description below. Go check that out if you're interested. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.